Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Buckeye Breakdown Midweek Natty Vibes episode here on a beautiful Wednesday. Had to change up the location a little bit. Nothing like being -2 degrees outside and the power going out and just destroying all of your plans. But either way, we are here. We have a national championship that we are looking forward to later on, or I guess early next week. Matt came on the episode on Monday, talked a little bit about the game. So if you want to kind of hear thoughts about the game, we may touch on some of that. But this is really just kind of, hey, not quite a preview, but more of how are we feeling midway through the week? What are some of the things we're hearing? Taking some thoughts from what happened in that game and really kind of putting that in perspective to the national championship. So for me, I think the main thought that I have right now and what I'm worried about, but also like curious to see how the Buckeyes handle and curious honestly how to see the Fighting Irish handle it as well, is there is a lot of national attention on this, clearly national championship. But a lot of that attention is geared towards Ohio State just being named the national champion, right? There are a lot of thoughts going into the Ohio State-Texas game that was the national championship, and this would be similar to like when Georgia and Ohio State played in 2022, similar to, okay, when they get to the national championship, it's going to be a cakewalk. It'll be like 56-7 or whatever. And I think that that's a wrong narrative, and I'm really hoping that that's not creeping into the Woody Hayes Athletic Center. I don't think that it is because they've been so caught off guard with that Michigan loss that I'm really hoping that it's not. But there is a lot of noise out there about the Buckeyes just being a national champion. And honestly, like I kind of caught myself after the Cotton Bowl kind of just like celebrating. Of course, there was a lot to celebrate in that, but almost celebrating as if it was the national championship because of how that happened. And, there's been so many of these games these playoff games that have happened that like in a normal year, we would have already won the national championship. Of course, also in a normal year, we may not be in the race for a national championship, but either way, there's just a lot of thought on the Buckeyes just already being the national champion. And my fear is that creeps in, right? People get comfortable, people get lazy. And I don't think this Buckeye team will falter and might fall into that because of what has gone wrong this season. That Michigan loss, I don't think that it was necessary to happen, which that's also another narrative, is that was necessary to happen for this national championship run to happen. I don't think that's true, but I do think that it's part of the story, and it does lead towards, being able to overcome some of these difficult circumstances. And a very difficult circumstance in sports and in anything in life is going into something expecting a result, right? Expecting that you are going to win. And then, just your preparation and things, you can prepare to win versus expecting to win are like two separate things, right? If you're expecting to win, you may not put in those extra reps. If you're preparing to win, you put in those extra reps, right? So I just hope that that's not creeping in into there, because on the flip side of that, Marcus Freeman and this team have been this kind of underdog story. And so, still one of the biggest brands in football, but for a long time, what was it, 90 or 88 was the last time that they won a national championship, really until the past year and really until this year. Like there's just been this preconceived notion that Notre Dame might be good enough to get to the playoff, but like when the playoff actually happens, they're not going to match these SEC and Big Ten schools. And, they really need to join a conference, which, we can talk about that. But I think that they've just been this underdog story. And I think that goes even further, right? A lot of people, I picked them to beat Georgia, but a lot of people did not pick them to beat Georgia. I think that there were some people going into that IU game thinking IU might win. And then, I think it was more split going into the semifinal, but I do think that, there was they just have overcome a lot, right? And so they're able to, and they've been having to overcome a lot to fuel their run. So when you're being told that Ohio State is already the national champion, that just makes things, that just fuels that fire even further. And so that can play to an advantage for Notre Dame, while it can play to a disadvantage for Ohio State. So I think because of how the Texas game went, because this team came back down to earth, that's exactly what we needed. Because honestly, there was like the buzzsaw theory I think people talked about in college football, where it's like, basically if they would have put on the same performance that they put against Oregon and against Tennessee, they would have put that against Texas and would have won in very similar fashion to that. Then it's like, I would be more concerned that maybe the preconceived notion that they're the national champion would have crept in a little further. So with that said, having that Texas, the way that happened, right? I think at all points in the game, I felt like the Buckeyes were the better team. They just kept getting in their own way. I, of course, at points thought that they were going to lose the game, specifically towards the end. I thought that there was a good chance that they would lose the game. I didn't think it was, the momentum didn't completely swing in their direction, but it was certainly in Texas's direction. And so I think the fact that, but they were the better team, and I think that they got in their own way, and I think they needed that, right? Because if they hadn't gotten in their own way so far, a team like Notre Dame with that mentality could take advantage of the situation. But because that game happened, because they got that gritty win and they were able to have that historic play, and hopefully it goes down for history forever if they cap it off with a national championship with Jack Sawyer. But either way, having that gritty win is exactly what this team needed to hopefully push out all of those narratives. And I think give this team like, hey, we can still get in our own way. Like, we can be the team against Oregon. We can go up 34-0. We also can barely make it to halftime at 14-7, right? Like, there was and Chip Kelly admitted it in his press conference. I'll take him for his word that if that screenplay wouldn't have accomplished, what it did, or, even half of what it did, he probably just would have kneeled it out. And that was kind of their version of a Hail Mary at that point. Right. So because they faced that adversity and overcame it, now I think that this sets them up. And I think that's the perfect game that they could have played, even though the game was not perfect, right? That is the perfect scenario to win, to overcome this, right? And to overcome the national narrative, and prepare them for overcoming that national narrative. So I think the other thing, and I was thinking about this too, there's a lot of teams that are like, Ohio State never wins games like these. Ohio State in the past year, and I know they lost to Michigan, and we'll never forget. I know that they lost to Oregon. And you do have those examples. They're not perfect. They're not the end all be. There's a lot of work to be done. But people forget that this Penn State game happened this year, right? Like, there was a lot of clutch. Say what you want about Penn State, that was still one of the 4 best teams, or the 4 remaining teams at least, and they beat them in their house in a gritty win. Yes, Nebraska is not a great team, and yes, IU had boat raced them already, but they won a gritty game in that matchup. And I think people will forget, and it was a different team in some aspects, but they also beat Notre Dame in a very gritty, backs against the wall game. So it's not like this is a new revelation, right? It's not like Ryan Day can't win these. It's just that he's lost them more than he's won them. But people do forget that this team does have that experience, and a lot of those guys all of those guys were on for at least clearly for this season, but a lot of them were on for that Notre Dame game last year. So either way, other thoughts. I mean, I just think that Jeremiah Smith, again, the other thing I'll say about Jeremiah Smith, or the first thing I'll say about Jeremiah Smith, but the other thing I'll say about having that game last week is that is perfect for the Buckeyes to experience the week before, right? Have Jeremiah Smith be shut down. First off, it proves that Jeremiah Smith is not the only solution to your offense. But number 2, it adds extra motivation to Jeremiah himself, Chip Kelly, Ryan Day, whoever it is, to, okay, he's superhuman, but you can scheme things up to take him away. What are we going to do plan A to get him open, but plan B, how do we better prepare that if he is taken away again? How can we, take more advantage of the other 5-star athletes that we have on our team? And I think that puts a chip on Jeremiah's shoulder. I think that is, again, similar to the Tennessee and the Oregon game, which he was big factors in both of those. He can be human, right? Or he can be, again, limited. He's still superhuman. He just can be schemed to be limited. And so that puts a chip on his shoulder to work harder this week and to overcome some of that. So feeling good about Jeremiah Smith. I don't really know. It sounds like there's all the experts, and I'm not one of those, but all the experts seem to think that they'll stick to their man coverage at Notre Dame, which they've been very good at. Have they faced a Jeremiah Smith, though? We'll see. But I'm curious to see. I'm curious to see how that all plays out, and if Ohio State is able to scheme him open and take advantage of man coverage to win that matchup without forcing things, right? Because there were some things that were forced by Will Howard and with that interception and some other things there where it's like, okay, like, he's taken away. So either scheme up something else on the offense or just take your ball and go home and focus on Emeka and Carnell and Brandon Ennis, et cetera. Jermaine Matthews, the other thing, first off, love Jermaine Matthews. He might be one of my favorite players on the team. I'm excited that he'll be around. There was a minute where like I was concerned, hey, maybe that could be a portal guy because, he was kind of limited in his playing this year, but he's stepping up. And Denzel Burke is having a little bit of – he's having injury issues this week, but has had a little bit of a setback season, even though it is his final senior season here. But either way, Jermaine Matthews, I think, is, again, so glad that he got an experience. I'm so glad that it's not the national championship that he's being thrown out there for. I think he's going to step up in a big way because I don't think that Denzel – I just don't get the impression based on the media. I don't get the impression that he's going to either A, be 100% or B, is he going to play, right? Is it more for break, in case of emergency because Jermaine or Iggy's getting toasted, or is it like he can play, but we're just going to trust these guys? So I don't know what that's going to be. And then the other thing, final thought, and I kind of talked about this, but I am so glad that the mental mistakes happened because that can be a focus point for this team this entire week. That can be, hey, we need to be better about this. Trevion Henderson, I don't know what that guy said. I don't know what happened on that play, but like that can't happen because that kills drives. Jumping offside. There's so many different things that happen that will need to be drilled in practice this week. That stands in the way of a national championship. We'll talk more on Friday when we do our breakdown episode, but I think the Buckeyes have to beat themselves to lose a championship this weekend. And I think that's a very real possibility of what's happened this season. That's why I'm not just declaring them the national champions. Because if they don't beat themselves, if they are very disciplined on penalties and in their preparation, I have all the faith that the athletes and the scheme and the experience and all of this stuff, I think that the Buckeyes will win. But I do think that if you kill drives, if you make those mental errors, I do think that could hurt this team. I think it could put them in a position to lose the game ultimately. So because that all happened, very glad that it happened because it can now be a focus point. So did a lot of rambling here, but I just wanted to give you guys a check-in on the week, kind of talk a little bit, it was kind of all tied together, right? A little bit Cotton Bowl, but like how does that tie into the national championship? So there's not a whole lot else to talk about at this point. Sounds like more of the media stuff will be happening later into the week. Matt and I will be back on Friday to preview, talk about the defense, talk about the offense, give score predictions, all of that. And then we're trying and we're thinking about going live as a reaction to the national championship. So when that final, bell hits 0 or kind of however that game goes, going live, whether it's me solo or Matt being able to join me, and just whatever happens, having a time capsule moment for ourselves on kind of what's going on with the Buckeyes. So thank you all for watching. Thank you for listening. We have plenty of content to go. A preview on Friday, some other stuff over the weekend, and then hopefully a celebration episode on Monday, and or a very long therapy session Monday as well. So thank you all for watching. Go Bucks, and we'll talk soon.